Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Moondancer, a lock-on laser-based shoot 'em up. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Teradine Games, Moondancer originally released for PC in January of 2022. Now in July of 2022, it's available for the Nintendo Switch, though at this time only in Japan, though I'm sure a worldwide release will be coming shortly. However, don't let that dissuade you from picking up this title. You can import it off of the Japanese eShop fully translated, or if you don't want to pick it up that way, it is available on Steam, also fully translated and ready to play. So this title is one that I can heartily recommend, especially if you're a fan of the Teradine Games' previous titles, such as Missile Dancer or Raging Blasters. And this title is kind of like a combination of those two titles, so if you liked either of those two, definitely check this one out. Also, another one that this title is similar to is Galactic Attack, so if you like that kind of gameplay, then this would be one that I think might be up your alley. So here we find ourselves at the main menu. You can kind of get an idea that things are on the relatively simple side, and if you've played Teradine Games' previous titles, it's a pretty similar menu style. But one thing I do want to note, under options, there is two soundtrack versions. There's an original soundtrack and a chiptune soundtrack, something that I think is just kind of neat for this particular title. Starting the game, we're taken to the select mode here. There is a nice tutorial kind of explaining the systems. Then you have your main arcade mode with 3 difficulties, normal, hard, and expert, and caravan mode, where you're setting the highest score possible in 3 minutes. When we start the game, we're given this brief little story segment. It's pretty bare bones, standard shoot 'em up stuff. Rogue Defense AI is threatening to destroy the system, or in this case the solar system, and we as the pilot of the starfighter Moondancer are charged with saving the solar system. Now, one of the things I really do enjoy about Moondancer is the relative simplicity of controls. So you've got the left side of a Nintendo Switch controller, basically your left stick, and the directional buttons that control your movement, and then basically everything else is your shot button. And that functions in 2 ways. So you might have noticed we have this reticule in front of us. That is our lock-on laser, or rather what we use to lock on the lock-on laser. And depending on what laser we're using, there's a certain number of lock-ons we can get before it fires. So your base one, the spear laser, will have a total of 10 lock-ons. As far as the main shot itself, it functions very similar to Raging Blaster's wide shot, where you've got the cannons firing in 4 directions around the ship and then your main shot forward. So for mob enemies, the main shot is useful, though ultimately, especially against bosses, the laser is going to be where you're getting all your damage. And there are actually 3 different types of lasers. So here's the spear laser, which once again has 10 lock-ons. Then for this boss, we'll swap to the napalm laser, which is really awesome. It leaves these napalm explosions on the enemies that continue to deal damage after the initial laser has hit, but it's limited in how many shots you have. So the number of lock-ons is reduced all the way to 6, making it significantly more limited than the other 2 lasers. So the final laser we'll encounter in the next stage. There have been a couple opportunities to get it in this stage, but I've taken a pass on those up to this point. And that's the multi-laser, which has a round reticule around the ship, so you can lock on to more enemies that way because the reticule is significantly larger, and you have a total of 12 lock-ons. So each lock-on laser, the napalm laser, the spear laser, and the multi-laser all have their own functionality and ultimately areas where I feel that they shine. So the napalm laser is definitely best against bosses. The other lasers you're probably going to want to use throughout the course of the individual stages themselves. One thing to note, you'll never take damage from enemies if you make contact damage. It's only enemy shots that will destroy the Moondancer, so that's something to keep in mind. There are sections throughout the course of the game where there are some chances for bonus points, hidden lock-on areas in the screen itself, or there's certain sections where there's missiles to lock on. And as far as our main shot, it's actually possible to level it up from level 1 to level 4, which is represented on the left there as max. And once you're at max level, every shot power or main shot power up you would pick up is worth 10,000 points. Like this one here, for example, we pick this one up, we'll see bonus 10,000 points. So if you're looking for a high score, that's one of the elements that will help you build that. So here's the final laser type that I was talking about, the multi-laser. So with this reticule, we can lock on to the most enemies, and it's really important from a score standpoint. So in the top left of the screen, you'll see under the Moondancer logo, there's this chain bar that basically is our chain combo. The more times we're able to successfully lock onto an enemy and hit it with our lasers, the higher that chain value will climb before, or as long as the bar doesn't completely drop. And once that does drop, we're given point values based off of our lock-on combo. So the longer you can keep that going, the higher the points you're going to score. And that's ultimately the main key element to having a high score run with this particular title. So as I noted before, our lasers are the main way of dealing damage to the boss. And I've kind of neglected to actually mention one of the key things I like about the lock-on system. So all the buttons are shot. When we lock on with the reticule, we don't actually have to release the button to fire our lasers. We just simply need to press another button on the controller. So you continue to fire without having to release any of the button that you're actually using to shoot. Though really, that's kind of irrelevant, as for the most part when you're fighting a boss, as really it's only kind of equivalent to chip damage what your main shot does to an enemy boss. That said, over a decent boss fight, it's not insignificant. So when we finish the stage, you might have noticed that we're getting all these crystals, and those crystals don't score when you pick them up, but rather they're tallied into our results at the end of the screen. Yet another element of this game's scoring. And you do have a nice little score log there that tallies all the scores you've recently obtained, be it from destroying enemies, picking up power-ups, or getting your chain combo score. So here we find ourselves at the third stage, and that's basically Moondancer served up for your enjoyment. So as far as minus flavors are concerned, you may have noticed with the gameplay that this game does incorporate a checkpoint system, and that's not really something that I'm ever a fan of. Though with that said, I do feel that Moondancer implements it significantly better than a lot of titles, as the checkpoints come across relatively frequently, and not only that, I feel that their placement is well designed. So you do have opportunities to power up before, say, fighting a boss in most situations, or even with that said, since your main method of dealing damage to the enemies is your lock-on laser, and that's always at the same power level, it's not going to be as detrimental to fighting a boss from scratch as far as power is concerned as some other shoot 'em ups. then I do feel that overall the game is relatively short, and I kind of feel like that might be some of the reason that there are checkpoints in the title, is if you could just start from where you die, the game would be over in relatively short order. And lastly, this is something that isn't really a complaint so much as something that would have been neat to see, but it's not possible to level up any of the lasers at all. You're just leveling up your main shot. It would have been great if, say, like the various lasers had maybe 2 levels of power associated with them. So if you picked up a second power-up of, say, like the spear laser or the multi-laser, it would just power it up into something a little bit more awesome, or even maybe change the laser type altogether. Something like that would have been really neat to see. But on the plus side, so one thing I really do appreciate about this game is its presentation. The pixel graphics are truly wonderful, and also the music is really fitting and something that I at least enjoy quite a bit. There's also simply the ease of play, having like the lock-on be just another press of the button, really any button on the controller, making it really accessible how you want to play this game. So in the case of right now, I'm using a shoulder button to fire my main shot, and then when I have my lock-ons, I'm say just pressing the A button to fire the lock-ons. And there's also that challenge that the game has. So I do really appreciate like a game that does have a good lock-on mechanic. I really do feel that it's one of the fun things you can do with the shoot 'em up, and this game implements it really well. And there's just that kind of like learning how best to both maximize the lock-on and also be able to, say, survive in a boss fight like this one without losing the lives because of the checkpoint system. So I do really kind of appreciate that challenge, even if it's not something that I'm a fan of at its core. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. Moondancer is definitely a recommend for me. I want to thank you so much for joining me this week. As always, I hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we'll see you next time.